Welcome to the Cover Crops module of our Transitioning to Organic series.
This module was authored by Adria Fernandez, Claire Flavin, Christine Moncada, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer from the University of Minnesota in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
We'll start with a brief introduction to cover crops, what they are, and why they're used. The Natural Resources Conservation Service defines cover crops as crops including grasses, legumes, and forbs for seasonal cover and other conservation purposes. In other words, a cover crop is a crop you plant not to obtain a harvest, but to provide soil health, fertility, or conservation benefits. Cover crops are typically planted after a cash crop is harvested, and can also be used in fallow years when no cash crop is planted. They are an alternative to leaving soil bare over winter, or at other times when cash crops are not growing. You may also hear cover crops referred to as plowdowns or green manures. These names indicate a key aspect of cover crops, that the plant material or biomass they produce is incorporated into the soil, rather than exported from the farm in the form of grain or forage.
Here we show rye seedlings in a field growing in spring after having overwintered.
Certified organic farmers are required by law to practice crop rotation under the USDA National Organic Program, known as NOP. Although cover cropping is not specifically required, cover crops are an integral part of many organic rotations. The use of cover crops aligns well with the organic principle of using well-designed rotations to provide biological solutions to the challenges of soil building and pest, weed, and disease management. And because of this, organic farmers are often leaders in cover crop innovation and adoption. The NRCS identifies 7 purposes for the use of cover crops that directly support the practice objectives identified by the National Organic Program. These are reducing erosion from wind and water, increasing soil organic matter content, capturing and recycling or redistributing nutrients in the soil profile, promoting biological nitrogen fixation, suppressing weeds, managing soil moisture, and minimizing and reducing soil compaction. Using cover crops on your farm can provide many benefits.
In addition to cover crop benefits, this module will discuss cover crop options, meeting cover crop goals, establishment and termination, rotations with cover crops, and economics.
These can include improved soil health, water quality, weed control, pest and disease control, and enhanced nutrient cycling. When farmers were asked to name the biggest benefits that they received from cover crops, most chose options related to building and protecting soil, improved soil health, erosion control, and increased organic matter.
These top 3 results were from a SARA cover crop survey conducted in 2015 to 2016.
When cover crop biomass is incorporated, it becomes food for soil microbial communities, contributing to building soil organic matter, which is essential to the structure, water holding capacity, and long-term fertility of soils. You can learn more about the role of soil organic matter in the soil health and fertility modules in this series. Cover cropping can also prevent and remedy soil compaction. When soils are compacted, soil particles are pressed together so that the roots have trouble penetrating, and the soils lose the ability to absorb water easily, leading to increased runoff, erosion, and low subsoil moisture.
Here we display a diagram of a cross-section of the soil of a soybean field, where there is less soil pore space. When rain occurs, the water pools at the soil surface instead of soaking in.
Cover crops can reduce compaction by extending their roots deep into the soil, which also creates pathways for rainwater to infiltrate and reach the subsoil.
Here we show a diagram of a cross-section of the soil of a soybean field that has had a brassica cover crop. Because of the larger soil pore spaces, rain can penetrate the soil, and the soybean plants have a more extensive root system.
In addition to improving and protecting soils, cover crops can protect water quality on your farm and downstream. By holding soil physically in place and preventing erosion, cover crops can reduce sediment loads entering waterways. But cover crops also take up nutrients that might be vulnerable to runoff and leaching. You may hear cover crops used for this purpose referred to as catch crops. Catch crops hold nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, on your farm and prevent them from becoming pollutants downstream. Another benefit of cover crops is improved nutrient cycling. Cover crops not only take up excess soil nutrients, but in the case of legume species, they can also fix or transform nitrogen from the atmosphere into plant-available forms. These nutrients are then released into the soil where the incorporated cover crop biomass decomposes. The addition of organic matter to the soil also supports increased soil microbial activity, leading to faster breakdown and release of nutrients from crop residues. Many farmers find cover crops helpful in controlling weeds. Cover crops can suppress weeds by competing with them for water, sunlight, and nutrients at times when there would otherwise be bare soil with no competition. Some cover crops also have a allelopathic effect, meaning that they produce chemical compounds that suppress the germination and growth of other species. Cover crops also diversify rotations, which can interrupt pest and disease cycles by breaking up the presence of pest or pathogen host plants with periods of non-host species. Some cover crops can also provide habitats for beneficial insects, including natural enemies of crop pests.
In this picture, a honeybee is pollinating the yellow flowers of a cover crop.
Though they have many benefits, there are also risks associated with using cover crops. Using cover crops requires additional investments in management effort, labor, and seed and planting costs. Cover crops also draw on soil moisture and nutrient supplies and can affect their availability to following crops. Cover crops can sometimes interfere with cash crop establishment by slowing soil warm-up, or if residues prevent good seed placement and seed-soil contact, or have allelopathic effects on the crop plant.
In this image of a field, the hairy vetch cover crop has overgrown the subsequent corn crop.
To make cover cropping work for you, you will need to choose cover crops and practices that can benefit your main crops while minimizing the potential risks. An enormous range of plant species can potentially be used as cover crops. However, in practice, there are only a handful that most farmers find practical for use in the upper Midwest. To maximize benefit and minimize risk, you'll want to start by thinking about what purpose you want the cover crop to serve and where you want it to fit in your rotation. This allows you to consider the set of crops suitable for a given purpose and select one with a growth period that fits your cropping schedule.
In this picture, we show winter rye and hairy vetch plants growing together in a cover crop mix.
Cover crop options include legumes, grasses, and broadleaf species, and also include overwintering and winter-killed choices. Winter-hardy crops like rye or red clover will provide a living cover to protect soil during the winter, and will have time to develop more biomass as their growth period extends into the spring. However, terminating these hardy crops can be challenging and require multiple tillage passes. If you are planning to follow the cover with an early spring planted cash crop, it may be more convenient to use a cover crop that will winter kill. Cover crop choices for northern environments are constrained by the short growing season and harsh winter conditions. To succeed in Minnesota systems, cover crops must be capable of emerging and growing strongly in the relatively brief, cool period between cash crop harvest and a fall freeze, and those intended to overwinter must withstand intense cold and variable snow cover. The cover crops that are most commonly used in the region include winter rye, annual ryegrass, spring oat, hairy vetch, red clover, and brassicas. Winter rye is a cool season annual grass with strong winter hardiness. It produces thick, high biomass stands that can suppress weeds and can also be used for spring grazing. If allowed to mature, it can also be harvested for grain. However, winter rye also has relatively high water demand, so it may not be suitable in situations where soil moisture is limited. Annual ryegrass, unlike winter rye, will not produce grain when fall planted. Annual ryegrass is quick to establish and will winter kill, so it does not need to be terminated in the spring. A good winter rye stand will provide physical protection of the soil through the winter and will help with infiltration of spring rainfall. Annual ryegrass is a moderate water user. Like annual ryegrass, spring oat is an annual cereal that can be planted in the fall and will establish quickly in cool temperatures and then winter kill. Its water demand is moderate, and many farmers find it to be an inexpensive, low-risk cover crop. Oats can be seeded into standing soybean to allow the cover to begin growing before the soybean is harvested. Hairy vetch is a nitrogen-fixing legume that can produce heavy, high biomass stands and is often winter hardy in Minnesota environments, although its hardiness is not fully reliable. Vetch is a low to medium water user. Another legume option is red clover, a short-lived perennial that is often grown as a forage, but can also be used as a cover crop. Many farmers like to underseed red clover into a crop of small grain, allowing the clover to continue to grow after the grain is harvested. Red clover has good winter hardiness and can be a strong nitrogen fixer. Many species of brassicas can be used as cover crops, including mustards, turnips, rapeseed or canola, and radishes. These crops put on rapid growth in the fall, and most species will winter kill, leaving tender biomass that degrades quickly. There has also been ongoing research on the potential of some brassica species to be used as biofumigants to control pathogens or nematodes, but results have been mixed. Many farmers are interested in mixing cover crop species to gain multiple benefits from a single planting. Common combinations include hairy vetch with winter rye and peas with oats. A range of commercially blended mixes are also available. These mixes can add diversity. However, particularly with more complex blends, it can be difficult to get all components to establish, which may result in uneven stands. You may find it safer to start with single species cover crops, then experiment with mixes as you gain more familiarity. How you use cover crops will depend on your goals for your farming operation. To choose a cover crop, you will want to first consider what goals you want to achieve. Explore the crops that contribute to those goals, and select one that fits the slot that you need it to fill in your rotation. Purposes you may be interested in include providing or scavenging nitrogen, building soil organic matter, controlling erosion, improving soil structure, suppressing weeds, controlling diseases, and providing habitat for beneficial insects. If you are hoping to use cover crops to contribute to your soil's nitrogen levels, you'll want to choose a legume crop with strong biological N fixation potential, such as vetch or clover. These crops should be planted with an appropriate rhizobium inoculant to ensure that they will nodulate and fix nitrogen. If your soil contains excess soluble nitrogen that you are concerned about losing to leaching, grass and broadleaf cover crops can help hold that nitrogen on your farm. A tender broadleaf, for example a radish, will winter kill and release scavenged nitrogen relatively quickly. while a grass crop will degrade more slowly and keep nitrogen supplies immobilized for longer. Legume cover crops can provide a nitrogen credit, or reduction in the amount of fertilizer nitrogen needed to a following cash crop.
For example, the nitrogen or N credit for alfalfa is 40 to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. For red clover, it is 40 to 80 pounds, while hairy vetch is 40 to 90 pounds. These figures are from Lebowski and Peters, 2012.
Although general guidelines exist, there are a lot of unknowns when determining N credits. So we recommend testing N levels in your soil before making fertilizer decisions. Further information on legume N credits is available in the Soil Health and Fertility module in this series. If your primary purpose is to build the organic matter level in your soil, you will want to use a high biomass cover crop. Overwintering crops will put on more biomass than winter-killed ones. And grasses, particularly winter rye, tend to be particularly strong biomass producers. Grasses also have a relatively high ratio of carbon to nitrogen in their biomass, which makes them relatively recalcitrant, or slow to degrade after incorporation. This contributes to the long-term building of stabilized soil organic matter. If your goal is to hold soil in place and prevent erosion, you'll want to choose a cover crop with a dense root system and thick, fast-growing stands. Winter rye, annual ryegrass, and oats are good options for erosion control.
In this image, we show a crop field where the soil is lighter colored on the slopes, which indicates topsoil erosion.
If your goal is to improve soil structure and break up compaction, crops with strong, deep penetrating roots will be helpful. Brassica crops, especially tillage or oilseed radish varieties, are particularly useful.
In this image, we demonstrate the size of the roots of tillage radish plants, which can be over a foot in length and several inches wide.
In the long term, cover crops that contribute to soil organic matter will also promote well-structured soils. For weed control, you will want to choose species that can serve as smother crops, forming a dense canopy that excludes weeds. Hairy vetch, winter rye, oats, annual ryegrass, and brassicas can be effective at controlling weeds. Cover crops may provide additional weed suppression through allelopathy or the release of chemicals that suppress weed germination and growth. To control disease by reducing pathogen buildup, you should choose cover crops from plant families that are not related to your main crops, so they will not be hosts to the same pathogenic organisms. Brassica covers like radish or mustard are a good choice for this in most Midwest rotations. Brassica crops have also been shown, in some cases, to have a limited suppressive effect on certain fungal pathogens. But this effect is variable, and you should think of it as a possible extra little bonus, rather than a reliable benefit of brassica cover crops. Row crop-dominated Midwestern agricultural landscapes tend to have very few flowering plants to provide nectar to bees and other ecologically important pollinators. Hairy vetch, red clover, buckwheat, and mustards and other brassicas all have flowers that are good food sources for pollinators. These crops can also provide habitat for predatory insects such as hoverflies, lady beetles, and predatory wasps that feed on crop pests. Several organizations offer decision tools to help you determine which cover crops may be beneficial on your farm. The Midwest Cover Crops Council has developed an online resource that will suggest cover crop options depending on your location, cover crop, soil drainage conditions, and system goals. You can use the tool for free at the link shown here.
The link address is Midwest, covercrops.org/selector-tools.
In this section, we will introduce how to establish and terminate cover crops. Getting good cover crop establishment starts with getting the right seed. Many seed companies will supply cover crop seed, but in many cases, you are likely to find that varieties are not specified. If you're planting an overwintering cover crop, check with your supplier to ensure that it is winter hardy for your location. With hairy vetch in particular, it's important to source seed locally because types originating in other states have been observed to be much less reliably hardy in Minnesota environments. The window for establishing cover crops to ensure a good stand varies by species. Winter rye can successfully establish any time between mid-July and early October. Annual ryegrass and spring oats should be planted by mid-August to ensure good stands before a freeze, while hairy vetch and red clover have a fairly narrow window in early August for reliable establishment. Brassica establishment windows will vary by species, but they are generally best planted in August. Cover crops can be planted with a drill or can be broadcast, after which they may be incorporated or left on the surface. Some growers hire agricultural pilots to broadcast an aerial seeding into standing crops, and specialized overhead seeders are also being developed for this purpose. In general, when broadcasting or flying on cover crops, smaller seeds are a better choice, including brassicas, cereal rye, or barley. Larger seeded crops like peas should not be broadcast or flown on. In SARE's survey of farmers using cover crops, the most commonly used planting method was drilling, followed by broadcast seeding and aerial seeding. Some farmers also found alternate methods, including using fertilizer spreaders to distribute seed or planting with corn and soybean equipment.
This survey was conducted in 2022 to 2023. 44.1% of respondents drill their cover crops, 31.8% broadcast by ground, 12.7% aerial seed, and 11.4% used a row crop planter or other similar planter.
Planting method can have a big effect on how strong of a stand you're going to get from a cover crop. If the soil is moist, all of these seeding methods are viable options. If the soil is dry, leaving the seeds on the soil surface will reduce germination and coverage during the fall, so it's important to drill or incorporate. In these images, you can see the difference that incorporation has made in germination.
In the first image, broadcast seeding was used and the vetch germination was poor. In the second image, the cover crop was broadcast seeded, then incorporated, and the germination was better, so the soil coverage was much greater.
You should check with your seed supplier for recommended planting rates, but in general, higher rates will be needed if you are broadcasting seed onto the soil surface versus drilling or incorporating the seed.
In this table of cover, crop seeding rates, the winter rye broadcast seeding rate is 90 to 160 pounds per acre and 60 to 120 for drilling. The annual ryegrass broadcast seeding rate is 20 to 30 pounds per acre and 10 to 20 for drilling. The spring oat broadcast seeding rate is 100 to 140 pounds per acre and 80 to 110 for drilling. The hairy vetch broadcast seeding rate is 25 to 40 pounds per acre and 15 to 20 for drilling. The red clover broadcast seeding rate is 10 to 12 pounds per acre and 8 to 10 for drilling. The brassica broadcast seeding rate is 8 to 30 pounds per acre and 5 to 13 for drilling. This data is from SARE's Managing Cover Crops. Profitably publication in 2007.
The main considerations when terminating cover crops are achieving full kill so that the cover crop will not persist as a weed in the following crop, and ensuring that cover crop residues will not damage the following crop, either through allelopathic effects or by interfering with planting. For example, cover crop residues can be dragged by the seeder, preventing proper seed placement. Farmers surveyed by NRCS indicated that they preferred most often to terminate cover crops by tilling. Others preferred mowing or chose crops that would winter kill.
This survey was conducted in 2014. 49% of respondents chose tillage as their preferred cover crop termination method, while 20% preferred winter kill, 19% preferred mowing, and 12% preferred another method.
Winter rye, hairy vetch, and clovers may be particularly difficult to kill and may require more aggressive methods.
The moldboard plow and chisel plow incorporate the cover crop into the soil, while disking, flail chopping, rotary mowing, and rolling/crimping do not. In general, moldboard plowing will result in the lowest risk of regrowth, but is also the most disruptive to the soil.
Chisel plowing, disking, and flail chopping carry moderate risk of regrowth, while rotary mowing and roller crimping are more likely to allow regrowth. The growth stage of the cover crop is an important consideration. Crops that have entered the reproductive stage are less likely to regrow, but will also leave less tender, more persistent residues. To protect your main crop from allelopathic effects, pest pressure, or planting problems due to cover crop residues, it's generally best to terminate your cover crops a little while you plan to plant the main crop. At least 1 week is recommended if the cover crop residue is incorporated, or at least 10 days if the residue remains on the soil surface. However, some crops, like soybeans, tolerate cover crop residue well and may be planted into freshly terminated cover crop mulch.
In this picture, we show an actively growing soybean crop that was planted directly into the straw-like rye cover crop residue.
In recent years, there has been quite a bit of research toward the development of organic no-till methods in which heavy cover crop stands, generally rye and/or vetch, are killed by mowing or roller crimping and left in place to serve as a weed-suppressing mulch, into which the following crop is directly planted. These techniques have proved successful in some regions, but can be challenging in northern environments with short growing seasons. Cover crops must be terminated at the right maturity stage to prevent regrowth, which is sometimes too late to allow timely cash crop planting. A thick layer of mulch can also delay soil warming, and weeds that succeed in penetrating the mulch layer can be very difficult to manage. However, many farmers have expressed interest in the prospect of cover crop-based organic no-till, and research is ongoing.
This image shows a rye cover crop with high biomass in the process of being roller crimped and producing a very thick mulch on the field soil surface.
Finding ways to fit cover crops into your rotation is a little like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. We'll look a little bit at how cover crops can be used to diversify corn and soy-based rotations. One of the most common cover cropping practices in corn-soy systems is planting rye after the corn crop. Winter rye seed can be drilled into corn stubble or is sometimes broadcast into a standing corn crop to allow the rye to establish before corn harvest.
This image shows rows of young rye seedlings growing between rows of corn plants.
The rye is then terminated in the spring before soybean planting. This can be helpful as the rye will suppress early emerging weeds before soybean planting, and soybeans are very tolerant of cereal rye residue, so their establishment should not be adversely affected. A corn-rye-soy rotation can be a good foundation for a farmer transitioning to organic. The corn-soy rotation can be further diversified by adding a small grain.
For example, year 1 is corn with a rye cover crop, year 2 is soybean, and year 3 is a small grain with a hairy vetch cover crop.
Because the small grain can be harvested earlier, it presents an opportunity for earlier cover crop planting, resulting in greater biomass accumulation. This is a good opportunity for a nitrogen-fixing legume, like hairy vetch, to build up a large N contribution before the rotation goes back to corn, which has high nutrient demands. Corn generally performs very well after a legume, and will also benefit from the nitrogen credit associated with the legume stand. Another way of incorporating a legume cover crop into a corn-soy small grain rotation is to underseed red clover along with the small grain.
In this example, year 1 is corn and year 2 is soybean. Year 3 is a small grain underseeded with red clover.
When the small grain is harvested, the clover will continue to grow until it is incorporated before corn planting. This technique is used successfully by many organic farmers in our region.
This image shows young red clover plants after a small grain crop has been swathed.
The more you can include crops other than corn and soybeans in your rotation, the easier it will be to fit in cover crops. The alternative crops and small grains modules in this series can help you get started with crops that may be new to you. As Minnesota farmer John Luman says, "We raise short-season crops. For us, that has meant raising organic dry edible beans, sweet corn, or peas. It allows us to raise more cover crops that get closer to full biomass production before termination." With cover cropping, like with any new practice, you'll want to assess how it will affect your farm's bottom line before you get started.
A survey was conducted in 2015 to 2016 by SAR that included a question on cover crop profitability.
Of the cover crop using farmers surveyed by SARE, about a third said that cover crops increased their overall profitability, while less than 6% reported a decrease in profitability. The rest reported that cover crops did not affect profitability, or they did not have enough data or experience to tell.
The exact percentages for each response found in the survey were 34.5% for not enough data or experience to tell, 33.7% for cover crops increase profitability, 26.1% for cover crops do not affect profitability, and 5.7% for cover crops decrease profitability.
The effects of cover crops on your farm's profitability will depend on the balance of costs and returns that you obtain from cover cropping. The costs associated with cover crops are the price of the seed and the costs of planting and termination, either in your time and fuel, as well as potentially new equipment or in paid labor or custom work. In the SARE Cover Crop Survey from 2015 to 2016, the average cost of cover crop seed was around $30 per acre, and the cost of establishment was around $17 per acre. The economic returns to cover crops come in the form of yield benefits to your cash crops and reductions in the need for purchased inputs. These will include a nitrogen credit for legume cover crops, the positive effects of rotation on crop yields, and the role of cover crops in building and protecting soil, leading to better water and nutrient retention. Many of these returns are difficult to quantify. There may also be incentives available from programs such as EQIP, which we'll discuss a little more in a moment. A useful resource for predicting how cover cropping will shake out financially on your farm is the Land Stewardship Project's Cropping Systems Calculator. This is a tool that allows you to compare the projected economic returns of different rotations and is available at the link shown here.
The website address is landstewardshipproject.org.
Steps to getting started with cover crops include clarifying your primary goals and objectives. What do you want to achieve with cover cropping? You'll also want to look at your cash crop rotation and identify the best time and place for a cover crop in your system. Then you can select a cover crop that will meet these goals in the time and space you have available. There are a few steps you can take to reduce the risks associated with trying out cover crops. First, choose well-established practices. That will let you learn from others' experiences. Second, experiment on a small acreage first. And third, look for funding opportunities that can help defray the costs of growing a cover crop. Federal programs, such as the Environmental Quality Incentives Program or the Conservation Stewardship Program, may provide incentives or cost share for cover cropping. The availability of these programs varies from year to year, so contact your local extension or NRCS office to find out about current opportunities. We've reached the end of our cover crops module. Thanks for watching.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.